Hello, I'm John Morewood, and it's a great pleasure to introduce to you the first lecture in our Waterloo Association Winter Lecture Series. And today I'm going to be looking at the Trafalgar campaign, not only concentrating on the 21st of October 1805, when we a period of time that we all think we know, but looking at the beginning of the campaign and bringing into perspective some of the actual additional battles and engagements that were fought. So we'll be stretching this from July 1805 through to February 1806. I hope to also give you some new perspectives on the events of Monday the 21st of October and introduce you to some new characters who you may not have come across before. So our journey today is going to take us, obviously, we'll be starting at Cape Finisterre, then going down to Trafalgar, back up to Cape Waterloo, and then off to the West Indies. You may be thinking why I think I can do this talk for you. And one of the things that some people don't know is that the first book that I co-authored was this book that the Nelson Society brought out in 1998 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Battle of the Nile, and I worked on it with Eric Tushingham and Derek Hayes. And I got a bit about talking about what the French were trying to do in the lead up and at the Battle of the Nile. And there's very little of that in English. There's a little bit more in French, not that much, of course, because the French lost. But it's only by looking at the French sources that you do understand why the French Admiral de Brézé made the dispositions he did. He didn't get it right, but once you understand that, you understand what he was trying to do. And it was a lesson that I learned, and obviously has been carried forward very much by Andrew Field and Gareth Glover. You can't really look at a battle unless you look at the first-hand accounts of all sides. So here we go. What was the aim? What was Napoleon trying to achieve? This is plan one. There's about 10 of them because he constantly altered the plans. But this was a plan he was going to put in place between July and September 1804. It did not involve Spain at all because at that time, Spain was not at war with England. But it followed some common basis. The French Mediterranean fleet would leave Toulon, and along with the Brest fleet, it would join and then sail into the Channel and allow the invasion to happen from Boulogne. And the aim of an invasion was not as far-fetched as everybody has thought. The Spanish had landed at Glen Shiel in 1719. In 1746, the French had fought at Culloden. In 1761, the French had actually captured for 48 hours Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland. And in 1779, a Franco-Spanish fleet had actually swept up the Channel with the aim of torching the Isle of Wight and the British naval base of Portsmouth. They'd only been stopped from doing so by disease breaking out. Later on, of course, we have French attempts to land in Ireland, 1796 at Bantry Bay, 1797, some land at Fishguard in Wales, and then 1798, we've got the landing at Ballinamuk and the failed landing at Loch Swilly. So it wasn't as far-fetched as everybody thought. The one problem with all these raids that the French had done and the Spanish on the British coast was they'd never been able to actually invade in strength. And that is obviously what Napoleon was trying to do. But the person that was actually going to be the linchpin of all of this was not the man on the right. It was not Villeneuve, not the man that will be in charge in 1805. The man that was going to be in charge was the man on the left, Latouche Treville, France's greatest admiral. The man who had the one thing that no other French admiral had. He had beaten Nelson. And he beat Nelson while Nelson had done his failed amphibious attack on the invasion flotilla at Boulogne. Latouche Treville had masterminded the response. And so Latouche Treville came into the Mediterranean fleet as the man who has the potential of beating Nelson. He reinvigorated the fleet. He encouraged them to go out and attack British frigates, And every day he would walk up the hill at Toulon with his telescope to look and see what was happening in the Mediterranean. In August 1804, one day, he did not come down. He'd suffered very much health-wise and constitution-wise from being in the West Indies, and he simply had a heart attack and died. His replacement was, of course, the man on the right, Villeneuve. And Villeneuve only got the job because his best chum was Decrès, the French Minister of Marine. Both of them had been at the Nile. And Villeneuve was haunted by what he'd seen of what Nelson had done at the Nile. Other people in the frame, the man on the left, reasonable performer, Gantillon, he commands the main fleet at Brest. We must always remember that the fleet in Brest is the main one for the French. It's usually twice the size of the Toulon fleet. But the man on the right, Bruy, former Minister of Marine, as an admiral had done wonderful stuff just in about 1800, 1801 in avoiding British patrols in the Mediterranean. And you probably think really that after La Touche-Treville, Bruy should have got the job of the Toulon fleet. But Napoleon needed him to actually be in command of the invasion flotilla. And then in March 1805, Bruy, at the age of 46, died of tuberculosis. So what we've got is the two main French best performing admirals are down. So when we got to March to August 1805, we were on Plan 5, and this had changed because all of a sudden Spain was now in the equation. And Spain had actually declared war on England as a result of a preemptive strike we'd done and mismanaged in October 1804, when without declaring war, we'd seized 4 Spanish frigates bringing silver from the New World, Spanish America. Unfortunately, one of the frigates blew up, took water of the treasure down with it, and with it the wives and children of leading Spanish colonial officials. And the upshot of this was that in Spain, the war party, which had been balanced and countered by the peace party, the war party gained the upper hand, and Spain declared war. And that meant that Napoleon could draw on the Spanish fleet at Cadiz. The idea was that the French Toulon fleet, Spanish fleet at Cadiz, head towards the West Indies, and then get the Brest fleet again would somehow avoid the British squadrons that were keeping it blockaded in, and in overwhelming force would sweep the channel and allow the invasion to happen from Boulogne. It's probably fair to say that in the French Toulon fleet being transported over were 4,000 troops who were going to seize British possessions in the West Indies. Now, Napoleon had his doubts. He'd got his doubts about Gantillon. He'd most certainly got his doubts about Villeneuve. And the real truth was that after they got themselves to the West Indies, they weren't going to be in charge. Because having offloaded the 4,000 French troops, the French infantry, their commander, a gentleman called General Lauriston, was simply going to pull out the letter. He was ADC to the Emperor and say, in the Emperor's name, I now take command. Our mission is back to Brest and Boulogne. And he would have as his second in command, a person we all know from Waterloo, Honorary Secretary, and he will be with him on the first part of this campaign. So, as you know, Nelson is blown off station, Villeneuve escapes, goes through the Straits of Gibraltar. Nelson thinks perfectly reasonably that this is a second bash at the French to try and establish a colony in Egypt, heads off towards there, comes back, finds out that Villeneuve is not anywhere in the Mediterranean. So 30th of March, Villeneuve and his second in command, a man called Dumanoir, they sail with 11 ships and 4,800 soldiers. 10th of April, they've linked up with the Spanish Admiral Gravina, taken 6 Spanish ships, 1 French ship of the line, off they go to the West Now, as you know, it's very much a game of cat and mouse. And what is remarkable is about the pace Nelson sets. By the time he gets to Gibraltar, having found out that the Villeneuve's headed towards the West Indies, he's a month behind. By the time he gets to the West Indies, he's probably about 6 days behind. And the real truth is that if he'd have actually gone north rather than gone south, the main battle of annihilation would have happened in the West Indies. But of course, it doesn't happen, and Villeneuve heads off. Nelson aims to go to Cadiz and sends off one of his frigates to warn the Admiralty. Lord Barham, First Sea Lord, sends a blocking force down from the Channel Fleet, linking in to the actual blockading squadron at Rochefort to head off the Franco-Spanish fleet. So the cunning plan is to meet them somewhere here. And this will be the first battle, Cape Finisterre. Now, the Admiral in command on the British side is Sir Robert Calder. He's sort of done okay. He's nothing special. He's not done anything bad. So he's sort of a medium performer. But one of the things about this battle on the 22nd of July, 1805, that we don't get a picture of, apart from this real picture here, is it's fought in fog. And that is going to cause a problem for all the commanders. 3 stages of the actual battle. You'll see on stage 1, the first movement, this is a French plan of a battle, that both sides are sailing parallel to each other. They are too far apart, they cannot engage. Second movement, something changes. But you'll see here the numbers involved. The Franco-Spanish fleet, 20 ships of the line. Calder has less, 15 ships of the line, but of those ships of the line, he has more powerful ships than do the Franco-Spanish fleet. What next happens is, oblivious to either side, both sides now turn. It's quite clear that Villeneuve and Gravina are wanting a battle, so does Calder. And by turning as they do, they get closer to each other. This is a situation about 6 o'clock in the evening. The action continues until about 8:30. And see, one of the issues we've got here is, unlike Trafalgar, the blue, which is the French ships, and the yellow, which are the Spanish ships, are not intermixed. The Spanish ships are in the van. By the time Calder calls off the action, the Spanish ships, Spain has lost 2 ships, 1,200 prisoners, 490 dead and wounded. Calder, 200 dead and wounded, and one of his first rates, the Windsor Castle, severely damaged. He's got 2 ships. That's okay. That's not what he will receive the court-martial for. It's what happens on the next 2 days. Because on the 23rd of July, the fog lifts, and Calder does nothing. He does not re-engage. And he doesn't re-engage on the 24th either. And Villeneuve doesn't re-engage. And people, the press, when they get news of this later on, will turn around and blame Calder. They will turn around and say, why didn't you re-engage? And indeed, Nelson later will turn around and say, Calder was so much worried about the phantom idea that there will be a sally out from the port of Ferrol, that he forgot the very real enemy in front of him at Cape Finisterre. But Calder will demand and receive a court-martial and will be severely reprimanded for failing to re-engage on the 23rd and the 24th of July. So here we see what then happens. Calder hangs around the Cape Finisterre and then basically divides his command. So he basically returns to blockade the Spanish naval base at Ferrol, and he detaches back again the blockading squadron to Rochefort. Villeneuve has stood off. He's gone to the port of Lugo, and there's a wind, there's a gale. And Calder is blown off station. Villeneuve sees the opportunity of getting into Ferrol. So by the 2nd of August, Villeneuve is in Ferrol and has now gained more ships. In fact, he's gained another 11. He leaves 2 that have been badly damaged in the action, but he's now got 27 ships. And what Calder does is he then abandons the blockade and heads up towards the Channel Fleet to join Cornwallis. So at this stage, Villeneuve is really in the top position here. He has now got 27 ships. The British squadron has moved back up to the Channel. He could progress Napoleon's plan. 1st of August, Villeneuve in El Ferrol receives Napoleon's instructions. Napoleon's instructions are: go to Cadiz, get the ships there, go to Ferrol, get the Spanish ships there, then come to Brest, link up with Gantio, and join us at Boulogne. 8th of August, Napoleon at Boulogne receives the news of Villeneuve's victory. Villeneuve's, incidentally, nothing like handling the press. Villeneuve has written a report which downgrades the Spanish participation at the Battle of Cape Finisterre, claimed all the glory, and Napoleon is turning around thinking, this is almost, we're there. We are almost there. So he basically instructs Decrès, the French Minister of Marine, to again instruct Villeneuve to make for Brest. And in real truth, on the 9th of August, Villeneuve writes to Decrès saying, I might go to Brest or I might go to Cadiz. So on 9th of August, Villeneuve, still there is a potential of him actually sailing up the Channel. The reasons best known to himself. On the 11th of August, Villeneuve decides not to head to the Channel, but to go back to Cadiz. And he arrives there on the 21st of August. Now, we all know the figures. 28th September, Nelson assumes command of Cadiz. He's got some of his Mediterranean command, some of the blockading squadron, more ships coming down from the Channel Fleet. He actually only knows 1/3 of the captains that he will fight the Battle of Trafalgar with. But his aim at the Battle of Trafalgar is that he will have 40 ships, and he believes the Franco-Spanish fleet will have 46. He's not got 40 ships on the 21st of October because he's had to detach for victualling a squadron of about 6 or so ships under Admiral Louis to Gibraltar and Africa to make up for supplies, because that's what you've got to do when you're on blockade. The other reason why he's not got 40 ships is the reinforcements have not arrived from the Channel Fleet. So what do we know? Well, as regards to 3-deckers, and I put 3-deckers plus there because, of course, the Franco-Spanish do have the largest warship in the world, the Santissima Trinidad, 4-decker warship. But we have more powerful ships. The Franco-Spanish fleet outnumber us, of course, on 2-deckers. As regards guns, guns are a problem. These are the figures given in Mark Atkin's excellent Trafalgar Companion, but you may have remembered from my talks at Higher. Guns are decided by the rate of the ship. So a 74-gun ship, 74 guns, but those are the cannon. They don't take into account any carronades, and what we do know is the one person who decides what cannons a ship should have and what guns a ship should have is the captain. So the captain decides. So you might have a 74-gun ship of a line, but the captain's decided to put more guns on. It could be 80 guns. We just don't know. But what we do know is the Franco-Spanish fleet, their guns, their cannon on the lower decks are of a higher caliber than ours. As regards personnel, there's something important going on here, which is the percentage between Navy and military. You'll see that the British, 85% of the men on the ship are Navy, 15% are Marines. The French, if we exclude that 4,000, 4,800 expeditionary force, 91% are naval. But look at the Spanish. 58% are naval, 42% are infantry. The reason for that is the Spanish are short of naval manpower. The Spanish coast for 10 years have been ravaged by yellow fever. Cadiz has lost 7,500 inhabitants through this, and the Spanish to man their ships are having to put infantry into the ships. There's something else that is in our favour: the health and training of our crew. The French and Spanish have never realised that they need to administer lemons to stop scurvy. And indeed, many of the crews of the ships that have come back from the West Indies are disease ridden. Our men are healthier, they are certainly better trained. We also have another advantage. The French and Spanish ships are using an old technique to fire cannon. You've probably seen it in all the films where somebody stands over the actual back of a cannon and touches the actual touch hole, and away the shot goes. We are using these things on the right, a flintlock mechanism, where you can actually stand back from the cannon, see where the shot is likely to hit, and then rank the lanyard. We also have an advantage that our gun ports are bigger, which means that we can move the cannon left or right, or up or down, and get a more accurate shot. And also, we have these. We have carronades. Now, there's a bit of a debate at the moment. Atkin has turned around and said, you know, the Spanish don't have carronades. He says they have howitzers. The Spanish say in their eyewitness accounts they have carronades. And he says the French have carronades because Napoleon has told Decrès, the Minister of Marine, to make sure they do. We have no evidence that the French have carronades. Admittedly, not all the British ships have carronades, but a vast majority do, and this is so important for close action. Another thing that's very important from our point of view is gunpowder and the quality of it. And one's always got to be careful here with Dr. Stephen Summerfield, who's the expert on this stuff, but British gunpowder is better than French gunpowder. British naval gunpowder is better than French naval gunpowder by about 15% in quality, and both are a lot better than the Spanish. And so what you do find, because of the French ships and the Spanish ships expending gunpowder at the Battle of Cape Finisterre, they've replenished their supplies from the Spanish arsenals at El Ferrol and Cadiz. It's of poorer quality, which means if you've got a lot of very large guns requiring a lot of powder, you haven't got the quality in the gunpowder here to make the cannonballs basically to have the force that they should have. The British have got excellent gunpowder. So, what's the plan? Let's look at the high command from the Franco-Spanish side. At the top, Villeneuve, well, he never really done anything great. He subordinated the commanders. The guy immediately below him is Dumanoir. Dumanoir hates Villeneuve's guts. He thinks he should have got the job. In other words, he should have been in charge. The guy next to him, Magon, hates both of them, and he's a very prickly character. On the right-hand side, the man at the top, the great Admiral Federico Gravina, commander of the Spanish fleet, distinguished service record. One of the things we forget is that the Spanish fleet is very good, ship-wise and officer class-wise. It has not suffered the problems the French captains have of basically nobles being guillotined or leaving the Navy. The Spanish guys have been all over the place doing voyages of exploration, trying to find the equivalent of the Northwest Passage. They've been in Antarctica. They are very, very good. And below Gravina, you get Admiral Alava, and the guy on the right, Admiral Cisneros, who is in command of the Santissima Trinidad, the largest warship in the world. There's a fourth Spanish admiral, more of him later. So you all know what happens. 20th of October, Villeneuve, finding that he's going to be replaced by a gentleman, Admiral Rossely, again, not too good on the on performance record, decides to come out. The original plan, heading to the Mediterranean. Nelson's waiting for him. He turns back. The fleet reverse, and we're getting very close now to the 21st. And of course, we all think we know what happens, because by the end of November, this, and it's from my copy of the Naval Chronicle, of July to December 1805. By November, this plan was in the hands of Lord Byron, the first Sea Lord. And indeed, a copy of it with some slight alterations would be submitted by Magendie, Villeneuve's chief of staff, to Decrès in Paris. So this became the established viewpoint. Here you have breaking of the Franco-Spanish fleet by 2 lines of ourselves. But of course, one of the key things is, as it says there, the third position. What were the other positions? And the other positions are in the remainder of the page. The page is squashed because, of course, it's portrait, so they haven't been able to portray the whole of the Franco-Spanish line here. But you see, this is a British position. The order of sailing is the order of battle, and then this gradually forms into 2 lines. However, the times are that that is 6 o'clock in the morning. This is 9 o'clock in the morning, and the third position, is at noon. So what's happened in between that coming together and the actual breaking of the line? And there are some things that if we accept the normal view, we cannot understand. So this one, very, very early in the action, the Victory loses its mizzenmast, the mast at the back, and the wheel, which is also at the back of the ship. Now, if you're going to actually break through the line, the shots hitting you would be at the front. To hit the mizzenmast, you've got to really get rid of the foremast and the mainmast, but that doesn't happen. And look at the log of the master, the sailing master of the Victory, still standing to the enemy's van, not the centre. At 11:50, the enemy began firing on us, and at 12:04, we opened our larboard guns. Port does not exist in Navy terminology until 1844. It's larboard or starboard. And then because the two sound the same, port replaces larboard. So these are guns on the left of the ship opening on the enemy's front. And here you go from Atkinson's second log. At 12:04, opened our fire on the enemy's van in passage down their line. And then at 12:20, in attempting to pass through the enemy's line, fell on board the 10th and 11th ships when the action became general. So this is saying to us, we're heading towards the van, Victory's heading towards the van, and then it's turning. And this is also indicated by some statistics I've been working on. These are the casualty figures, dead, wounded, of the British ships as a percentage of the ship's crew. There's some interesting things happening here. This, from the Victory down to the Spartiate, is Nelson's column. From the Royal Sovereign to the Prince is Collingwood's column. For Nelson's column, the most powerful, fastest sailing ships are at the front. Britannia, which is also a first rate, middle of the line. And it's these 2 ships, the Victory and the Temeraire, that take the greatest punishment. But when we get to Collingwood's column, it's not his most powerful ships that take the punishment, it's the Bellerophon, the Billy Ruffian, and the Colossus. And also, he's not put his main ships at the front of his line, just his own ship, the Royal Sovereign. What's going on? Now, this was investigated in 1912, the Bridge Report, Admiral Bridge, with a commission, included the Regius Professor of Modern History at the University of Oxford, and they came up with a different story. For the Victory and some other ships had feinted towards the French van, sailed down, and then broken through. In 1951, the Naval Admiral Taylor, in the Mariner's Mirror, had disparaged that. He ignored the eyewitness accounts of the Victory's log and simply said Nelson's commitment to actually getting into the battle would have meant he wouldn't have done any feinting to the van business. However, in 2005, a group of war gamers and historians, with the benefit of more ships' logs having been discovered now from both the French and the Spanish side, put all the logs into a computerized simulation, a war game situation. And actually, we are very close now to knowing what actually happened at Trafalgar. This has been supplemented by the great Colin White discovering Nelson's handwritten sketch of the actual, what his plan was for the battle, his memoranda that he sent out to his various captains, which we've now discovered, and more ship's logs. So Nelson's original plan, if he'd had 40 ships, was to break the French line. I put this into a slight crescent because that's what happens on the day. And what Nelson wanted to do was Collingwood would attack 11 ships from the rear of the Franco-Spanish fleet. Nelson would come in on the centre to take out the commander-in-chief, to take out Villeneuve. But the key thing here was this other column of 6 fast-moving ships, who Nelson said would break the line 4 ships ahead of him. And the aim was that this would scare the van. The van, thinking that this line was heading towards them, would put on more sail and would sail on. And what this would mean, with the wind blowing from the top of the screen, from the bottom of the screen to the top, would mean that when the French van actually turned round, it would take longer to come back to help the centre and the rear of the Franco-Spanish fleet, by which time it was expected the centre and rear would be destroyed. But of course, Nelson doesn't have 40 ships. So what he does do is his column, the lead parts of the column, sail towards the van, turn, and then break through the centre. And indeed, the memorandum of instructions he sent out to his officers that we now have copies of said this: the commander may aim to deceive the enemy by inducing them to suppose it is his intention to attack their van. This wonderful tactical innovation means that by the time Dumanoir, heading the van, does decide to turn, the gap between the French van and the French centre is 2 miles. That will take time, and the van is operating against the wind. And this explains the very fact that the Victory will head towards the van and then turn down and sail down the line, explains how it can lose its missile mast and lose the operation of the wheel, because it will be damaged by the Franco-Spanish ships firing at it. Another innovation, Nelson orders the white ensign to be displayed. Now, we don't know why he does this. It may be that because of a light breeze, he thinks that previously squadrons would go in displaying their flags of their commanding officers. You know, the Vice Admiral of the red, the Vice Admiral of the blue, the Vice Admiral of the white. And it may be that Nelson thought that the tricolour in a limp wind would look like it was a flag of an Admiral of the blue or an Admiral of the red. So he gave instructions that the white ensign was to be deployed. This is the first time, apparently, that a white ensign is deployed across all ships in a British fleet action. This is why, as a result of Trafalgar, it is a flag of the Royal Navy. The other thing we need to consider is Nelson also did something innovative. We are so used in these depictions to see all the ships sailing very close to each other. This is not actually what happened. And this explains why his 3 ships at the front are the ones that take the greatest pounding. The great French military commander, the naval commander, the Comte de Suffren, who was operating in the Indian Ocean at the time of the American War of Independence, had outlined a theory that to break an opponent's line, you should hit it with your fastest moving, most powerful ships. Yes, there would be a problem for the slower ships keeping up and then coming into the battle, which would mean that your fastest ships and your most powerful ships would have a potential for suffering more damage. Nevertheless, the shock of this arrowhead breaking the line, Suffren said, was worth trying. The first person who tries this in a naval battle is Nelson at Trafalgar. What's happening on the other side? Well, Nelson had delegated, as you can see here. The second in command will have the entire direction of his line to make the attack upon the enemy. So Collingwood could do whatever he liked, but Nelson had given him a steer. He said, break the Franco-Spanish fleet, 11th ship from the rear. And he did that because Collingwood, if he'd have done that and concentrated with his ships, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15 ships, 15 onto 11, he would have superiority. Collingwood doesn't do that. He breaks the line 16 ships further on from the rear. So this means he's not got numerical superiority, and he gives a signal for each of his ships at the front to pair off. And unfortunately, for both the Bellerophon here and the Colossus here, the Bellerophon pairs off and actually is opposed by 3 ships of the Franco-Spanish fleet. The Colossus comes up against 2, and that's why they suffer the casualties. The remainder of the ships hit in overwhelming force the rear and then work up the line. And this explains why the Bellerophon and the Colossus suffer the very high casualty figures they do, and indeed why Collingwood's actual column suffers the casualties it does. It becomes a pell-mell battle. And the other thing that Nelson's instilled upon his captains is support each other. If you go in, if you knock out a ship, don't worry about taking possession of it. Move on to the next one. Let one of your weaker ships take possession of the enemy. Move on, move on, move on. And that's what happens. So by about 2ish in the afternoon, the centre looks something like this. And it's about 2 o'clock, but Dumanoir, having ignored Villeneuve's signal saying, come and help me, for about 1.5 hours, for reasons best known to Dumanoir, Dumanoir finally decides to tack against the wind and head towards the centre. By that stage, of course, as we all know, Nelson has been mortally wounded, and we have, from obviously the people that are actually surrounding him as he's lying, dying, his statements, what he said, well, Hardy, how goes the battle? How goes the day with us? And Hardy responds, very well, my lord, we've got 12 or 14 of the enemy's ships in our possession, but 5 of their band attacked and showed the intention of bearing down upon the victory. I therefore called 2 or 3 of our fresh ships around us and have no doubt of giving them a drubbing. But the key thing is that for the captains and their flag lieutenants on the ships, they don't know Nelson is down. So when the flags go up from the victory saying, take position around the victory, i.e. come and protect us, that's not an instruction from Hardy. That's an instruction in their belief from Nelson. And so it's not 2 or 3 ships that come to the victory's aid, it's that lot. And even one of Collingwood's ships, the Mars in Collingwood's column, comes in. The whole defensive line, including the first-rate ship of the line, is put in front of Dumanoir's squadron and the victory. The result is basically part of Dumanoir's squadron takes off towards Cadiz. So does one of the French and the Spanish ships here. Dumanoir's the front part of the van, even though it's only opposed by 2 British ships, shears off. In other words, Dumanoir scalpers. What's the result when partial firing continues until 4:30 p.m.? British fleet, 11 ships unmanageable, severely damaged. We must remember that the French and Spanish ships, despite the awfulness of Villeneuve's command, the Franco-Spanish ships fought very bravely and their men fought very bravely, and they put up dramatic resistance. So severely damaged 11 of ours, they lost 18. We lost 1. And then the question would be, well, what do you do? Of course, as Hardy wrote to his friend Mansfield, Nelson had died, but Collingwood is now in command. And Collingwood has a decision to make here. He's about there. Nelson has instructed the fleet to anchor after the battle. Why? It's perfectly sensible. If you anchor after the battle, you can deal with repairs, you can deal with securing the prizes you've taken, you can establish tow lines between the captured ships and their British captors. It's much more difficult if you don't anchor. Collingwood, for reasons best known to himself, decides not to anchor and to try and get out from Cape Trafalgar and head to safety in Gibraltar. At this moment in time, there is a slight swell picking up. There is no storm on the 21st of October. This is again from the Naval Chronicle, July to December 1805. Here's the harbour of Cadiz, the Bay of Cadiz. We think here is the spread out British fleet and their captured ships. And here are the very, very treacherous shoals and rocks that run along the coastline towards Cape Trafalgar, which is there. The first thing that happens is the wind starts to blow from the west, pushing everybody towards those rocks and shoals. Collingwood, by about 7 o'clock in the evening, remember it's 21st of October, so light is fading here, he manages to get to about this position here. And then he's on board a frigate, the HMS Euralius. It's towing his flagship, the Royal Sovereign. The Royal Sovereign, with the swell, bumps into Euralius. And Collingwood realizes he isn't going to get to Gibraltar today. The wind now turns. It starts to blow from the south towards the north, and everything starts to being pushed towards Cadiz, but more importantly, towards the rocks and the shoals here. So 22nd of October to 26th of October, the wind rises dramatically, force 5 to force 9. And it stays at force 9 until strong gale, until daylight on the 23rd. 2 French ships escape, and 2 ships we realise we aren't going to be able to handle given these weather conditions. We cast them adrift. We say to the French and Spanish crews, you're on your own, and we take off the prize crews. And this is going to lead into this relatively unknown part, the Franco-Spanish sortie on the 23rd of October. So these are the 2 ships, that the Fougere and another one that actually end up, you can see on the rocks and on the shoals on the evening of the 22nd of October. What's happened to the High Command? Well, Villeneuve is a prisoner. Dumanoir has fled. Magon is dead. Gravina has got back into Cadiz, but is severely wounded and will die from his wounds in January 1806. Alava is wounded and a prisoner. Cisneros wounded and a prisoner. But remember, there was a 4th admiral. And the 4th admiral is this man, Ascano. Now, Ascano had also a very good reputation. He'd actually served as Gravina's chief of staff on board Gravina's warship. And Ascano now finds that he is the only one holding admiral rank in the combined fleet, i.e. for the first time, the Spanish can call the shots. What Ascano turns around as early as the 23rd says, because of the way the winds have dispersed the British fleet, we've got a chance of recapturing some of these ships, folks. And he basically promotes 2 men. The first one, the French captain Cosmo Julien, and a man with a very Spanish-sounding name, of MacDonald, Irish descent. And he says to them, take out the ships we've got 6 seaworthy, recapture some of the prizes. And they will be heartened in this idea by the arrival of 2 ships that have escaped. How have they escaped? They've simply confronted the prize crews, and we know this from first-hand accounts, and said, look, we outnumber you 10 to 1. We'll kill you, or you can join us. The prize crews go, fair enough. The Bucentaure, Villeneuve's flagship, will almost make it into Cadiz and then crashes on the rocks. Most of its crew, including the British prize crew, are drowned. But one of the other ships, the Algeciras, will actually make it into the harbour. And this inspires the guys that are involved in the actual sortie. So out they come. And they actually recapture 2 ships. They recapture a lava, picture here, on the Spanish first-rate ship, the Santa Ana. They also capture a Spanish ship, the Neptuno, although that will be destroyed in the gale, because unfortunately for the Spanish-French sortie, no storm returns, and the ships are caught outside the harbour. So storm conditions continue up till the 30th of October, so another week of this. Force 10, violent storm, force 11. 9 ships are wrecked, and they're wrecked in the big bay of Cadiz. And Collingwood, having realised that he can't really defend his prizes if the French and Spanish make another sortie, he actually scuttles 5 of his prizes. In all, perhaps 2,700, perhaps 3,000 men lose their lives in the storm. We're very grateful for Dr. Dennis Wheeler, meteorological historian, who's actually created weather maps showing the conditions on the 21st of October and during this period of the storm. You can actually get hold of those if you look at the Royal Meteorological Society's website. What's the casualty rates, I suppose? Well, as you know, the Spanish, the sortie, they recapture 2, they lose 4 ships. So they lose more ships by doing the sortie than if they'd stayed in the harbour. But the boost in morale is great for them. As regards the other ships, these are the ships that basically, such as the 2 of the ships from the sortie, actually end up being wrecked on this coastline. Bronze figures Spanish, blue French, and these are the ones that Collingwood actually scuttles, including the Santissima Trinidad, the Spanish 4-decker. Ultimately, Collingwood, with 4 prizes, that's all that's left, will get to Gibraltar. You're probably wondering what's going to happen with this deadbeat Dumanoir. And Dumanoir basically has stood out into Atlantic. And his plan is basically to come back, ignore the Spanish port of Ferrol, and get to the safety of a French fort at Rochefort. This will be fine, providing he's not picked up by any of the British blockading squadrons. And of course, that's what does happen. He gets picked up by the squadrons. And the British commander is a guy called Sir Richard Strachan, also perhaps pronounced Sir Richard Strawn, who, this is a Spanish map of what happens. North is pointing down, which is why east may appear on the wrong side. And what Strawn does is that he's just got the same number of first-rate ships of the line as Dumanoir, but he's got frigates, and he deploys them very, very well. And what he will eventually do, from engaging the black is the British ships, white is the French squadron, he will actually get his frigates to pretend they're ships of the line. And he will actually get them to engage Dumanoir's squadron as it sails through. Dumanoir will surrender. He will be criticised and court-martialed for not getting out of this fix and doing better. But by 3:30, he has lost his 4 ships. And these 4 ships are brought back to England, and along with the 4 ships that Collingwood brings back, these are the 8 ships taken from the Franco-Spanish fleet at Trafalgar. And this is one of them. Some of those ships are taken into British service. This is implacable. And this is actually what it looked like. It survived until 1949, when faced with a bill for restoration, it was decided to scuttle it. And so we took it out into the waters, Spithead. We put a British ensign on and a French ensign, and we blew it up. There was an absolute outcry. As a result of the outcry, the powers that be decided not to blow up the next ship that they were thinking of blowing up, which was the Cutty Sark. And that's the reason why the Cutty Sark is preserved. There are some elements left of the Implacable or the Duguay Trouin, to give it its proper name, under Dumanoir. For £300, the Navy was persuaded to save the stern, and that is now in the Neptune Court at National Maritime Museum at Greenwich. This is the figurehead. We're not too sure whether this is the figurehead of the ship when it was a Duguay Trouin, or whether it's the figurehead of HMS Implacable. But there's one group that we haven't decided or talked about yet. We've talked about the French and Franco-Spanish center, the rear, the van. We haven't talked about those 6 ships that Nelson actually sent to victual at Gibraltar and at Africa, the ones that missed the Battle of Trafalgar. And to say that the captains that were in those 6 ships were pissed off at missing the Battle of Trafalgar is probably an understatement. And in first part of 1806, a message arrived to their commander, a guy called Sir John Duckworth, that 2 French squadrons had broken out of Brest. They were both heading to the West Indies. One would be damaged by storms, but one wouldn't. And it was under the actual command of this man on the left, Admiral Lessegue, and its purpose was to go to the West Indies and prey on the convoys, prey on all that wealthy shipping of the West Indies trade. It is actually caught off San Domingo by Duckworth on the 6th of February 1806. All the ships of the French are taken. And it's almost like the British commanders are on a high. Pulteney Malcolm takes the captain takes one of the ships, and then he's so determined to take another, he actually rams it. It's almost like, Athenian maritime history, BC. He's so keen on taking the ships. The guys are so determined. The very fact that they've left Cadiz being guarded by frigates, that they've acted in contravention of instructions from Admiral Collingwood, is ignored or oblivious to them. As far as they are concerned, they've completed the job. They've had their Trafalgar. And the 6th of February engagement is really the last battle of the Trafalgar campaign. Also, it is the last fleet action in open water of the Napoleonic Wars. The issues of Martinique in 1809 do not involve ships of the line, that's frigate action, and the issue of Basque Roads is, of course, not fleet action in open water. So bizarrely, in 1806, this is the end of fleet actions in the Napoleonic Wars. And it probably says something, but in a way, it just completely double underlines Britain's naval superiority. What's the reckoning of the whole campaign? British ship losses, 0. Franco-Spanish, 31. Casualties, 3 British senior commanders killed. Nelson, Duff of the Mars, Cook of the Bellerophon. 14 Franco-Spanish commanders, admirals, and captains killed. Some killed at Cape Ortegal, some killed at San Domingo. Other ranks, it's impossible to tell. These are again the numbers bandied around in the Trafalgar campaign, but if we can't work out, folks, what the French casualties are at Waterloo, how on earth are we going to work them out for this campaign as well? Logs and details are just not kept. Documents are lost, ships are lost. It's impossible to tell what the casualty figures of the Franco-Spanish actually are. The British, which are closer to the truth, is about 2,500. Figures bandied around, Franco-Spanish, 10,000. It could well be more. However, there are some people that are involved in this Trafalgar campaign that we will meet again on the 18th of June, 1815. Now, this man, Dan Snow, made a big song and dance about this, tweeting that he discovered there was one person who was both at Trafalgar and at Waterloo, and this, of course, is Alava, the nephew of Admiral Alava and ADC to Gravina. So he'd been on Gravina's flagship during the battle. Well, we all knew that, but there were two other people as well. The man on the left is Drouin, an artillery specialist, who at the Battle of Trafalgar is actually in command of the batteries on the French warship the Indomptable. Of course, at Waterloo, he's command of the Imperial Guard. Second in command to Loviston at the Battle of Cape Finisterre, but not at Trafalgar, is Honorary Secretary, who of course is at Waterloo. And there were regiments in that French expeditionary force, 4,800 men, who originally were going to be put in the West Indies, and then Villeneuve got into the Mediterranean, landed at either Egypt or Sicily, but were at Trafalgar, 2nd and 93rd de Orléans, and the Artillery de Moran. Those regiments at Waterloo. Now, of course, there's a lot going on between 1805 and 1815, but did anybody in those regiments serve at both Trafalgar and at Waterloo? I don't know. One person to spare a bit of thought from is old Pulteney Malcolm. Pulteney Malcolm, of course, had missed Trafalgar, but he'd made it to San Domingo. In June 1815, he's commanded gunboats on the Scheldt. He knows Wellington. He turns up at the Duchess of Richmond's ball. And on the 18th of June, he rides out, just to prove to you that admirals can ride, he rides out to Mont Saint-Jean and speaks to Wellington. And he says, what do you think will happen today? Wellington apparently turns around and says, I don't think there'll be a battle. So Pulteney Malcolm says, well, I'll be off then. And he rides back to Brussels. And so Pulteney Malcolm is the only man who missed both the Battle of Trafalgar and the Battle of Waterloo. Thank you so much for listening.